District 6400 superheroes background.
Okay.
Hey, Lynn, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you too.
Yeah, this is so great to be here. I have to say, I am so proud of all of the efforts this year with the well, one of the initiatives we're working on in Rotary is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's being really pushed forward through the Peace and Conflict Resolution Rainbow Connection Group. And they put together all kinds of things to raise consciousness, create conversation, and try and close some of the gaps that we're all dealing with, whether they're economic, political, racial, and so forth. So my hat is off to all of them, and thank you so much for putting this together. This looks really fantastic. There's a bunch of great faces here.
And Doctor, how often do you get to wear that jacket?
On Zoom, too often. Yeah, it's kind of my, my Rotary identity jacket. So, I don't want to get lost in this beautiful superheroes background. So, and if I could really quickly say, this background was designed by Liz Smith, and the foreground of it is the skyline of Windsor. And we're looking across the river, and then we've got the skyline of Detroit behind it. So it's really an amazing custom background. So my acknowledgement, tip of a hat to Liz Smith for doing that.
Very cool. I think we can get started, even though we have quite a few more people joining in at different points. So I just want to welcome everybody to the Civility Project, and I'll tell you a little bit about what our plan for tonight is so that we can be prepared. In a minute, I'm going to share a quick little video from our sponsor, Delta Dental, to thank them for making these events available and free, both to the hosting organizations and to all of you who are joining us. And then we will get started. Stephen and Nolan will talk a little bit, introduce themselves, introduce the Civility Project. And then this is a 90-minute session. So we have the benefit of 2 breakout groups. Actually, let me ask you all to mute your microphones if you don't mind, unless you are one of the speakers. That would be really helpful. If you have questions or comments as we go through the night, please put them in the chat. But then we'll have opportunities to speak up as well, because we'll have 2 breakout sessions where you'll be in small groups and you'll be able to talk one-on-one about some of these issues, and then bring back to the main group what went on in your breakout rooms. So that will be really wonderful. But in the meantime, if we could mute our microphones, that would be great. And then we will get started. So would somebody from Rotary District 6400 like to do a quick introduction about why you guys decided to host this event? And then we will jump into our video. Therese, do you want to do that, or Noel, do you want to do that?
Therese, why don't you take that away? You and Fred have done such an amazing job putting together all this programming.
Well, thank you. Dr. Fred Pearson from the Peace and Conflict Studies Institute at Wayne State and I co-chair the Peace and Conflict Resolution Committee for District 6400, Rotary District 6400. And we were asked by Dr. Noel Jackson to facilitate conversation throughout his Rotary year. We have worked with several organizations. I was fortunate enough to participate in a Civility Project workshop in July. Coincidentally, on my birthday, I was invited to attend a Small Business Association event and was really excited. I don't want to embarrass myself, but I'm going to. I'm a bit of a fangirl when it comes to Nolan and Stephen, because I'm super excited. I've read both of them in both papers. And I think with everything going on right now, it's a perfect time for us to learn how to talk to each other and listen to each other. So Lynn and I worked on this project, getting a date scheduled. And I'm super excited to have everybody here. Dr. Noel Jackson has been quite a leader in not only diversity and understanding, but listening to each other. So again, Lynn, thank you for having us. And Dr. Noel Jackson, thank you for being such a fabulous leader.
Well, Therese, thank you too. That fangirl club is a lot smaller than it ought to be, isn't it, Steve?
I don't know anybody who's in it.
I see Milt Mack in the audience. It's been a long time, Milt. Milt was my attorney when I made the young and foolish decision to sue my company back, I guess it was about 40 years ago.
It's been a
What I
while.
felt was cheating me out of a stock deal.
They were.
I still don't believe, and we won, Milt, and I
Yeah.
managed to survive and stay employed another 40 years.
It was amazing.
Defies
Great
all
work.
logic.
Great work.
And of course, the Free Press, when they wrote about this suit from the Evening News shareholders, I mean, there were people that had like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of shares, millions of dollars worth of share. I had one share. The Free Press wrote about it. They said Nolan, Finley, Chet Bulger, and other news employees were above. I'm like, what the hell?
Well, you like to make a point.
On that note, I think we will go to our video and we'll get started with some civility building. So let me just share this really quickly and then we will jump in.
We are living in challenging times. Politics is polarizing. Racism is rampant. The pandemic is frightening. And families are divided. Tough times require more dialogue and more understanding. But navigating our differences constructively is hard work. Delta Dental believes that healthy, smart, vibrant communities are also civil and harmonious. They are places where disagreement does not have to be toxic or destructive. Civility starts with listening. Welcome to the Civility Project. We are living in
Goodness gracious, welcome. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to Stephen and Nolan. If you could introduce yourselves and the Civility Project, and we will jump in. I'll just remind everybody, if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat and I'll get to it in the order that we receive them. So Stephen and Nolan, take it away.
You go ahead, sweetheart.
Okay, so the Civility Project, I think, is probably best described as an effort by Nolan and by me to share some of the things that we have been able to accomplish and some of the things that we have learned about relationships across great divides over the 13 years or so that we have been working together and have been friends. I want to say up front today, I think I'd be crazy not to just throw this out there that because of what has happened in the last week, I think the subject of civility, I think the difficulty of civility, I think the call to all of us to be able to think about our differences in civil terms is probably of greater urgency than I have ever experienced. I can't think of another time when things have been this nutty, and I think the challenge that we face ahead of us is so daunting, and it is so frightening, I think, to think about what will happen if we're not able to figure out more civil ways to think about our differences and to express them. But Nolan and I have been talking about this long before what happened last week, and in fact, long before Donald Trump. We sit on polar opposite sides of the political spectrum. Nolan is a conservative. I consider myself a liberal or a progressive or whatever term you wanna use. And for a long time, the yin and yang of our politics was something that kind of brought us together in our work. People would ask us to appear together on television or on radio or in other forums and argue. And we were pretty good at that because we do really disagree, and we do have really different points of view about a number of different things. But as we were doing that, and as we were kind of becoming even better, I think, at the sort of spectacle of our disagreements, we developed a respect for one another and for one another's opinions and one another's approach to things, even though we bitterly disagreed, and we developed a friendship as well. And over time, that friendship attracted attention because people sometimes were often, surprised that we could be friends. They would be like, how on earth can you be friends with that person? That doesn't make any sense. You don't agree on anything. And over time, the world around us, I think, became less and less, not just accepting of those ideas, but less and less, hospitable to the idea of relationships that cross political divides. And so over time, we came to the idea that there was something about what we were able to do, that something about what we have been able to maintain, that would be of value to other people. That if we could get other people to think about it the way we do, to do some of the things that we try to do, that there would be more civil conversation. There would be a possibility for more civil conversation. And when we talk about civil conversation, I think it's really important, especially important right now, to talk about where we're advocating that. We are not saying that you have to countenance the kind of behavior that we saw last week and be nice to the people who did it. We're not saying that people who, want to commit violence against the government that we all share, against the country that we all share, even have a seat at the table, really, to discuss this kind of difference. We're talking about in our own lives. We're talking about in the place where you live. We're talking about in the place where you work, in the family you belong to, in the school communities that you might belong to. How do you, in those places where most of us live most of our lives, right? We don't live in the world of politics. We don't go to the Capitol in Washington to debate our differences. We do it in those other spaces. And so in the places where we spend our time and with the people we spend it with, how do we find a way to talk to people who we don't agree with and maybe have very bitter disagreements with, without getting to the incredible incivility that has marked so much of what has gone on recently. And so we launched the Civility Project a few years ago as a way to do that, and we've been sharing it with groups like these since then.
The video we showed earlier that we started the session with, make note, I think its opening line was, "These are challenging times," and they certainly are, and they're angry times, and they're very divisive times, but there's a silver lining in all of that, in that it has forced or encouraged people to engage, people to pay attention to what's going on around them. And as they've engaged and as they've paid attention, it's also prompted them to talk about what's going on and to weigh and consider solutions, answers. And it's not, certainly there's no common ground yet, there may not be, but the fact that people are talking, engaging, discussing their differences is a positive thing. Our goal is to encourage them to continue those conversations in a way that's constructive, in a way that builds trust, and hopefully leads to toning down the hostilities in America. What we're seeing now is this, move toward hate as a dominant force in our society. And, we're just, trying to make the point that you can disagree without hating. You can disagree without dehumanizing one another, because that leads to a bad place when people start dehumanizing each other, thinking of groups that don't think like them as somehow less than they are. Leads to some very bad things. We've seen that in this country and throughout history. And we just are trying here to talk to folks about how they can sort of expand the circle of people they're comfortable talking to, even if they disagree with those people. That's what the Civility Project's all about. It grew out, as Steve said, of our friendship, but also of our efforts over the past several years to bring groups of people, to groups of friends and acquaintances together. Some who come from Steve's point of view, some who come from mine, and put them together in social settings where they can learn that these folks are basically we're just like each other, only we think differently. And there's no reason to feel intimidated by that or to get angry over that. And it worked. And a lot of people who, at our bourbon nights, and we neglected to tell you it was all about bourbon, but a lot of the people at our bourbon nights ended up forging relationships with people they wouldn't consider thinking of as friends before. And that we wanted to take it to more people, and that's why we're here with you all tonight. I think civic organizations like yours are the perfect forum for this, because you're all about making your communities more civil and friendlier.
Much for that introduction. It's funny. We've done a lot of these in the past year. Originally, when we started this, we were going to do in-person events, and then COVID. And so we've been doing a lot of them online, more than we had planned, with more people than we had imagined across the country. And we have always brought up topics, how do we build civility in a time of fear, in a time of pandemic, with social media, with election season, with racial turmoil and systemic racism and all these issues, and then last week. And so what I'm thinking is that we should start with our breakout rooms and have you guys talk about the roots of your beliefs, and then we can circle back to how we build civility after everybody's had a chance to really connect on that level, if that's okay with you guys. Stephen, Nolan, is that okay?
Yeah, I do think we should explain the purpose of this exercise. We started doing these sessions, like when we were in person, we would ask the groups we were speaking to put together people from opposing viewpoints, to put them together in advance to, talk about why you feel the way you do, why your politics are the way they are. But before you get into the disagreements, the political discussions, to learn, that process, what the other person went through to forge the opinions they have, because we find that most people come to their opinions the same way, by taking the facts and information available, applying their own personal experiences and values to that, and coming up with a viewpoint. And if you understand those values and those experiences, it's a lot easier to engage in a conversation at a more respectful level. The greater the understanding, I think the more trust you build. And so this is a trust building exercise.
Yeah, so I think what we want to do, and I'm going to break you guys into groups in a moment of 5 or 6. So the idea is that every person in the group has a chance to speak. And what you want to share is not necessarily, I belong to this political party or that one, but what motivates your vote or your position, what in your background, your values brings you to that place. And so I think if we have about 10, 11 minutes to discuss that, each person can have about 2 minutes. When we come back together, it would be really lovely to hear what unfolded in your group. If there were, any realizations or connection points, or you learned something, but we're trying to connect on that human level so that once you get to know the person, then you can have those difficult conversations, not the other way around. So we'll do that, and then we will come back together, and then we will jump into some of those deeper issues that I mentioned earlier, and of course your questions as well. So here we go, and have fun. Welcome back, everybody. It's like time travel, going to the breakout rooms and right?
Yeah, it's like the Star Trek beaming. We were beamed back here.
Where are you when you're in between? I'm not sure.
I feared that.
Here's everybody. Welcome back.
Could have used more time.
Oh, Lynn, you're so hard on us.
You guys had the longest amount of time any breakout room has had, and you want more time, so we'll have to do it. We will definitely give you a second chance.
Okay.
Happens every time. So what we'd like to do is to ask you if you'd like to share what unfolded in the group, any interesting surprises or synergies or revelations. Share with us what happened in those groups.
I would say we were self-selective just by being here, because we all sort of agreed that regardless of our differences, we can get along and talk about them. And we really dislike people being jerks.
Well put.
Tell us how you really feel, Russ.
I just want to comment that before we went to those breakout sessions, we had 3 screens, and now we only have 2 of people. Is there something technologically wrong?
No, I think we lost a couple people. So it just depends how many we have and how many can fit on a screen.
Oh, well, on my computer, I had 3 full screens of people.
Okay.
I only have 2 screens now. What does that mean?
People that left don't want to talk to anybody.
I was gonna say, there's still a lot of.
Sheila, is there a little box up in the corner that you can click on?
Speaker view I've got on this. I hadn't changed anything. Let me look
No,
here.
but it changed when you switched from room to room.
Okay, I got.
Let's continue though. Let's ask who else would like to share, and let's do one at a time, about their group or what they noticed, or is this something that you even have ever asked yourself? A lot of people never explore the roots of their beliefs or their voting tendencies. So let's do one at a time. You can also use the raise hand under reactions. Laura, would you like to go? And then David?
Okay, our group, there were 4 of us. We're all Democrats. So we all have similar beliefs, similar reasons. So it was kind of surprising. I've always thought of Rotary as being more of a conservative group, you know, in general. So it was kind of surprising that we were all Democrats. So that was
Laura,
surprising.
let me ask you a question. Was everybody a Democrat for the same reason or the same background, or were there different influences that you found within your group?
There were slightly different influences. Scott didn't get to talk much. He was in our group, but we ran out of time. But I think, yeah, it was FDR, you know, the influence of FDR and on our parents, and struggling as people ourselves, seeing our parents struggle. That seemed to be a common theme.
Mhm.
And you know, and people expressed that they liked Milliken, you know, Bill Milliken, that his style of governing was, you know, compatible with their beliefs. And of course, he was a Republican. So, there were common themes.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Laura. Appreciate it. David Carpenter, you wanted to go next?
Yeah, we didn't discuss our political party, although I felt like we were leaning towards more conservative. But our real discussion was about immigration, because one of the 4 of us, grandparents came from Ellis Island. Mine came with Christopher Columbus. So there was quite a bit of diversity, and the thought that we had to have some legal means, pathway for citizenship, rather than necessarily breaking across the border and then declaring yourself a citizen. So it was all about immigration, but we needed another 2 hours to get to the bottom of the subject.
That's great. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Yes, Beth, was it Beth who raised your hand? Yeah.
Yes. Well, our group, I think that we all were fairly compatible in our political beliefs, some more moderate, some a little bit more on the liberal side. But our conversation surrounded kind of more of how when you're working for the common good, the being civil and being nice and being open to what other people think and believe is a way to reach your common goals at the end of the day. And that, you know, the civility and the demeanor and the things that have been coming out of Washington have gotten in the way of that happening, because really at the end of the day, we all want our nation to be great. We want our world to be great. And we really all want the same things. It's how we get there.
Yeah, really well said. Thank you, Beth. Would anybody else like to share from their group?
Sure.
Okay.
My name's Paul, and we maybe messed up a little bit. There were 4 of us, and I think we were waiting for more to join, so we had a little chit chat. But I went first, and after going first, I realized that I was outnumbered. My leaning is towards the right and the red, and the others I believe were more blue and conservative. But one of the things I came away with after our discussion was that a lot of our current beliefs came from our parents and our upbringing and the type of work and the environment that we've each been in for the majority of our lives. And after we got back together and trying to think about what to say, I know from my point of view, and I heard it with the others, that our upbringing and our early years influenced our political tendencies in our current affairs.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. So let's go to Don and then to Lois and John. So Don Lieto.
Yep, thank you. Well, it kind of started in our group that, being Rotarians and sharing the core values that we share, you would think we wouldn't have any issues with communicating with one another. But surprisingly, there is, because of the diversity of thought, even among Rotarians, that there's challenges in being civil in our communications, particularly in the political arena. So our conversation kind of evolved into more of a policy session in terms of the immigration discussion, as opposed to what really brought us individually to where we are today in our ability to communicate.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Lois and John, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I unmuted myself. I just wanted to say real quickly, our breakout session was phenomenal. It was fantastic. There was 2, 4, 5, 6 in 4 windows. But the cool thing was we had Florian Wackerman join us from Germany.
Wow.
And Florian, correct me if I'm wrong, you were an exchange student some time ago with the Grosse Point.
20 years ago, in 98, 99, exactly.
So,
yeah.
It was so exciting. But anyway, Lois has some intelligent comments to make.
Gosh, I wish I could remember them. My position is that for the most part, almost all of us are in our own bubbles, and we're not really crossing over from one to another and discussing anything. We're just kind of throwing ideas back and forth and bouncing them back and forth, but we're not actually having any discourse on much of anything that's political, in my opinion.
Anybody else?
Well, Lynn, this was an exercise Steve and I engaged in on a bit larger scale for NPR StoryCorps, and it was Steve's idea, and he orchestrated it. And I'll let him tell you about it, why we did it, and what came out of it. Steve?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, NPR StoryCorps is an effort by the network to collect American stories about relationships. They go from city to city in a little Winnebago and invite people down to come and spend an hour talking to one another about how they know each other, what the importance of their relationship is, and how they've been able to maintain it for the time that they have. It typically attracts people who are married to each other or are part of one another's families. But when they came to Detroit, I decided that I wanted to take Nolan with me, and that I wanted us to go and spend that hour talking not about the things we normally talk about, which is politics or policy and having a debate or an argument about it. I wanted us to talk about who we were and where our points of view came from. What is it that makes Nolan Finley a conservative? Why does he see things that way? Why do I consider myself a liberal or a progressive? What were the experiences that I had that led me there? And I wanted us to do that, because we'd never done it before, and I think neither of us really knew a lot about the other in that regard. But I also felt like it would change the dynamic between us. That if we went and did that and knew those things about each other, then the way that we have debates and arguments about policy would be different. It would be informed by those things, and that's a big part of the foundation for this exercise that we now make part of the Civility Project, is that when we did that, it did change our perspectives on a number of things. I think, again, we learned things that we didn't know about the other. We also found areas of commonality between us that we didn't necessarily know about before, things that you could look at in our backgrounds that were similar, but that we drew different lessons from. It really was eye-opening, and I think this process that you guys just participated in is a critical way to be able to understand better where other people are coming from. I think that's one of the most difficult parts of civility, is that we make assumptions about where people get their ideas, and often they're nefarious assumptions, right? We assume that there's something bad underlying what they believe, and when you know what really underlies what they believe, it's easier to look past that and to take them at face value, and to believe that what they're saying is genuinely felt and is coming from a place of their experiences, of their real life experiences. It's a lot harder to judge, I think, when you know that.
And it also, that exercise also taught us that we're both more than our politics. And I think all of us are more than our politics. And we discovered we had, who would have thought, a good number of things in common, including a number of opinions in common. As I said in our breakout session, and I heard somebody else say it too in there, is that, we start from different places and we have different ideas and different strategies for, getting to where we want to go. But the place we want to go, we share in common. We want this to be a better, more loving world, and our communities to be more prosperous and productive. And once you acknowledge that you're trying to get to the same place, makes it a lot easier to engage. It doesn't necessarily take the conflict away. It gives you a sense of purpose in terms of continuing to pursue that goal together. The other thing, and Steve's much more eloquent on this point than I am, we committed going into that to really listen to each other. And it was perhaps one of the first times we actively made that commitment. I think we thought we had been listening to each other in the past, but most times when you enter these sort of conversations, you're not really listening.
Yeah, I mean, listening is a big part of what we talk about when we talk about civility, and we talk about active listening, which is more than just not talking. Frequently I think we believe that if we're not talking, we must be listening. But as Nolan says, a lot of times we're not talking, but we're thinking about our own thoughts. We're thinking about what we're going to say when the other person stops talking. We're thinking about what the other person is saying in a judgmental way. We're not really just listening to try to really understand where the other person is coming from and why they believe what they believe. And it takes a little patience. It takes a little effort on your part and some intentionality. But it is a better way, I think, to engage in this kind of debate or discussion.
So, the other point, that we always make, and if you let us just go through a few of these, Lynn, I think while we're on the subject, it'll be helpful. But the other thing, that we started paying a whole lot of attention to is, beyond the listening is to set an honest goal for the conversation. That's setting a goal that focuses on a desire to better understand the person you're talking with, or the person you're engaged with, and to converse in an honest way. we say a conversation is not a competition. And so if you're setting out to win a conversation, to win an argument, if your goal is let's grind the other person into the ground and we'll walk away satisfied and feeling superior. As Steve mentioned in the beginning, he and I in the beginning were faced off on a number of television shows, radio programs, public appearances, because people thought, wow, it'd be fun to watch those two fight. And, we did a whole lot of fight and still do. But, the thing I respected about Steve early on, this wasn't true about some of his predecessors as my sort of public adversary, is that he didn't set out to just score a victory, to embarrass the other person and, to play a gotcha game. And I think that's important. Set an honest goal for the conversation. It's not just to get your opinion out there. It's to truly absorb the other person's thinking and opinion with the goal of maybe gaining some value from that. We don't try to convert each other. That's an irresistible instinct, and sometimes we do, but that's not our mission. It's not to convert each other. There's value in the conversation, even if we don't change each other's minds. It helps forge our own views and sort of sharpen and test our own views and gain a greater understanding of, the people and issues we're writing about. So there's value in that conversation, and we find it. And so, you don't make the conversation a competition. You don't set out to convert. Obviously, you listen. And the other thing is, you don't walk away. You don't walk away from each other just because things get tight.
Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I was thinking that I know Fred has a question, and also Beth asked a good question. And then, so I do want to address those. I also would like you guys to touch on what active listening really is. And Stephen, you should know that from all these sessions, I now use it with my teenagers. It's not really working yet, but I'm hoping it will at some point.
I never did get to that point. So.
That's the toughest crowd of all.
I don't think they have intentions of being civil, so it may not be relevant. But yes, let's hear from Fred, and then if the two of you could explain what you mean by active listening, because I think all of us always need a reminder of that.
And I'm certainly a booster of active listening. I did want to mention, and Nolan was in our group, that I had raised a concern about certain people with whom I think that it's very, very challenging to be civil. And those people are like the people marching with tiki torches in Charlottesville. And the people, some of whom showed up in the Capitol with obnoxious t-shirts about Camp Auschwitz and things like that. And I'm not sure I want to hear them, actively or inactively, and that anything good could come out of hearing them. But individually, maybe they're interesting about their background, but this is especially challenging.
Yeah, thank you, Fred.
Yeah, and I don't think we're suggesting that it's possible to have these civil conversations with people who are filled with hate and bigotry, animosity, crazy, if you will. But that's not most people, and that's not most people who you'll encounter on the other side of the political aisle. There are groups on the left that I don't want to engage with, and on the right that I don't want to engage with, and would find nothing productive in that engagement. But there's a whole lot of people in between those extremes that we can find some value in engaging.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Civility is not a call to turn your head from the most vile or violent elements of our society and say, well, we've just got to get along. We don't have an obligation to that. In fact, we have an obligation, I think, to stand up when people's rights are being violated or challenged, when the system of governance, of agreed upon governance that we all share in this country is under assault, literal assault. There is a limit to the ability of civil discussion to bridge the divide. But like Nolan said, we're talking about closer in your life. You know, how likely are you to meet somebody who was marching in Charlottesville or was storming the Capitol last week? But there are people that you encounter on a regular basis in your life who have differing views and strongly differing views in many cases. I think what we're suggesting is that what's possible is a more constructive dialogue with those people, which again, I think in the aggregate does push back against the kind of things that we saw last week. I mean, it does tamp down on that, but I don't think that you can, you know, imagine that there's some way you could relate to, you know, somebody who's storming the Capitol with 30 Molotov cocktails in their backpack or whatever that person had. I mean, you know, this is insane behavior that that's dangerous and is a threat to all of us. And the civil thing to do, I think, is to come together to put it down and to get rid of this element in our politics.
So Beth asked a question. She said, following the events of last week, how can we as Rotarians facilitate the needed conversations in our communities? And maybe you want to talk a little about active listening and anything else that you recommend that people can do to actively heal this situation.
Well, I think there's an opportunity coming out of this because I think we've reached consensus, pretty broad consensus across the party lines that this was reprehensible, this was unacceptable, and this can't be allowed to endure. Now, I'm not suggesting it's 100% consensus, but I know a lot of the people in the circles I'm in are just appalled and sort of saw it as a call to action to take a more civilized and reasonable approach to our politics. I think people recognize, a lot of people recognize the danger. And I think more people are talking now than perhaps were before. So there's an opportunity there, you know, to do some good, perhaps.
Yeah, you know, I think Nolan's right that there is an opportunity, and I also am seeing and hearing more people, you know, acknowledge the things that you know, were wrong about what happened last week. But I want to tell a quick story about something and then kind of apply it to this situation. You know, when I came back to Detroit in 2007, I had been away in other cities for about 13 years. I mean, I had been gone a long time. And when I came back, Kwame Kilpatrick, who I've known most of my life, you know, since we were small boys, and our families have known each other and worked together since before either of us was born. You know, when I came back in 2007, he was the mayor, which always tickled me a little bit. I was like, how can he be the mayor? That's crazy. He was 31 when he was elected, and so that first year that I was back, he and I really connected because, as he would say, there wasn't anyone else in the media locally who he could relate to the way that he could relate to me. I mean, we knew each other. We had a lot of things in common in our past, and he would talk to me a lot about things that he didn't talk to other people about. We could have private conversations about stuff that I didn't necessarily put in the paper, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, pretty quickly, I was working at the Free Press, you know, the text messages came into the door, and we had to decide what to do with them and how to react to his incredible betrayal of the city that he and I both said we loved. and you know, we had to put his misdeeds and him, you know, out front and call him out and say, look, this is a betrayal of unbelievable magnitude, and you can't stay. You cannot stay. You cannot stay as mayor. You know, and the entire system that you're part of, this system of give and take outside the rules, the system of shakedowns and all this other stuff. That's all got to go, right? We need a new way of doing things in Detroit. And that was a really hard decision for a lot of people, but it was a really hard personal decision for me. I mean, it was a personal betrayal. He felt it was a personal betrayal. And the people around him felt that. And a lot of people around me felt that. And I spent a long time feeling pretty conflicted about what I was supposed to be doing and how I was supposed to be doing it. You know, 12 years later, I have no regret or compunction at all about what I did, what role I played in all of that. I did the right thing. And yeah, I betrayed somebody who was my friend, but he had betrayed us. He had betrayed the city. But it's still one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I mean, I took no joy in what happened to him. I took no joy in the things I had to write about him for a long time. It took more than a year and a half to get all that done. I think Republicans right now face a kind of similar reckoning, that the things that we saw last week, Republicans and conservatives, the things that we saw last week are part of their politics. It is not, that doesn't mean that every Republican believes that or would behave that way. But the party has condoned a lot of this stuff or looked the other way for a long time. We just finished 2 Senate races in Georgia where the Republican candidates who were running against a Black man and a Jewish man ran ads that darkened the skin of the African-American candidate and lengthened the nose of the Jewish candidate. These were sitting senators in Washington who ran campaigns that relied on that. I mean, the extent to which racial resentment and the violence that comes out of that is fueling conservative politics in this country is poison. It is toxic. And we need conservatives who don't believe that. And I think that's most of them. We need Republicans who don't believe that to stand up and say no more, not just no more when they storm the Capitol, but no more when they run ads like we saw in Georgia, trying to win Senate races. You know, no more when the president comes out and says there's good people on both sides of a Klan march in Charlottesville. No more when money gets raised by this appeal to racial resentment and violence. It's hard. It's really hard to do it. It's uncomfortable. It can be painful. I lost friends over the Kilpatrick thing. People who still won't talk to me. People I'd known most of my life who don't want anything to do with me. But it was the right thing. And I think Republicans have got to look really deep within themselves. Conservatives got to look really deep within themselves to ask what kind of country we want and whether that's possible if they continue to placate this faction of their party. That is a big part of civility. That is the kind of accountability that I think is critical to being able to have disagreements with the other side and have everybody believe that it's all on the up and up, that everyone's being honest and that everybody does really want the same things. And you know, look, I can't tell Republicans how they have to do that. It's not my business. I'm not part of that party. I don't consider myself a conservative, but I think they've got to do it. I think they got to figure out for themselves what that looks like. what does the party look like going forward so that we don't end up in this space again?
Getting some really good comments that I just would like to share from participants. Thank you to everybody who's posting them in the chat. Therese said a comment made to me when we started the conflict resolution committee was, don't we want to change people's minds? The point is not to change minds, but to open ears and listen. Laura said, I'm having a hard time controlling my anger with people who claim the election was stolen from Trump. How can we get past the anger? After I read these comments, I'm sure we'd love for you guys to respond, Stephen and Nolan. Russ said, when confronted by someone saying what I believe is insane or vile, does it make sense to ask, why do you feel that way, before dismissing them? And Scott said, we need to be more willing to call out those who represent us when we disagree with what they do and say on both sides of the aisle. It seems that we are willing, oh, I just lost that. We are willing to defend people until the behavior or verbiage escalates well beyond the point at which it should have been confronted. Can we educate our people to defend civility first and foremost, civility before allegiance to leadership? And then Russ said, good point, yet the Twitterverse went nuts when Vogue lightened the color of Vice President-elect Harris. And then Trey said, some are saying that the violence last week was perpetrated by Antifa members masquerading as Trump supporters. So wherever you guys want to start would be great.
Well, I'll jump in on a couple of those. I can't remember all of them. First, I mean, the violence last week was perpetrated by Trump supporters, the fringe of Trump supporters, certainly not all Trump supporters. Many Trump supporters I've talked to over the past week are just as appalled as anybody else. But this fringe group, the extreme element that sort of, came to rise, I think, with the Tea Party movement many years ago, and that morphed into Trump. And that's when sort of the Republican Party lost me and lost a good number of other conservatives who had been, Republicans in good standing for most of their lives. And so the party, as parties tend to do, saw this group as their means to winning elections and maintaining power. And that's become all that's mattered, all that matters to these parties. And so, yeah, no, it was them. It was, NFI has done their own damage in recent months that can't be excused or explained away. But in this case, this was that right-wing fringe. And I was surprised, and probably shouldn't have been, because I have, I have been talking to a lot of those folks leading up to the election, and it was clear that their anger and their mistrust of the institutions was growing. And I talked to a guy in the neighborhood who was a week before this, and he said, maybe 2 weeks, he said, watch out for January 6th. That's where the real action is going to come. And it just never really settled in and registered with me what they were talking about. So yeah, I don't think you can excuse it or forgive it or put it off on some other group. It was what it was, and we saw it. As to why people thought the election stolen, I have some thoughts on that. I think you had a lot of people, a lot of Republicans and a lot of these fervent Trump supporters who saw over the last 4 years this by any means necessary effort to take down the president they elected. And, they lost their trust in the institutions of, American institutions. And it made them very, very susceptible to be manipulated. And Trump exploited that mistrust. But, you have to understand why they were so mistrustful. I mean, they saw this nonstop effort to take down the president, and they stopped believing in the system. And then you couple that with this unfortunate unfortunate timing of this COVID pandemic, when the rules of the elections were being changed to accommodate getting people to be able to vote to facilitate the vote. They saw in that just another phase of this conspiracy. And so, I mean, there were a lot of unfortunate things that happened over the, that led to their mistrust.
I want to mention one other comment, and Nolan, this echoes something that you had said the other day. So Edward said, I don't think the point is to have an intervention with people who exhibit cult-like behavior, but to reach those who have not been radicalized but are vulnerable. There is money made in dividing us, and that has always been that way. And you mentioned the other day, Nolan, that leaders or people in power want to hold on to power, and that may not be in the best interest of the people. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about.
That's the place I've come to. I'm done with partisan politics. I'm done with the Republican Party. I've taken a break from that party and will stay broken with that party until it returns to the values it held when I came in as a young man during the Reagan years. I think partisan politics aren't serving us as a nation very well because they profit from our divisions and they profit from whipping up fervor and becoming cult personality cults, if you will, and it enables this sort of us against them mindset that they're constantly promoting. Enables somebody like Trump to rise, and a guy who was a master at manipulating our fears and our prejudices and what have you. I don't want any part of partisan politics at this stage of my life, and perhaps for a long time to come.
Stephen, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, no, I think I'm starting to hear lots of people say the same thing that Nolan's saying, which is that, look, this is too much, this is too far. And the question is, what do we all do together to be able to move in a different direction? I mean, what I was talking about was the accountability that I think conservatives and Republicans have to give some thought to for themselves. It is not just about them, though. The future of this country is going to be defined by the ways in which those of us who disagree with them are able to move forward and move to a different space as well. Partisan politics is not the sole provenance of the Republican Party. You've got hyper-partisan Democrats in Congress in some cases as well. We've got to sort of take a pause, take a breath here. I mean, this is an 1861, 1876 kind of moment in this country, and those last two historical examples went very badly because people were not willing to do that. So I'm hoping that this time we are.
I think we have to break this duopoly. I wrote Sunday, that we need to take some very strong steps to, break this stranglehold the two parties have on our political process, because within those parties, they don't make room for the middle. And most people in America live somewhere near the middle. And there's no room in these parties anymore for the middle. And Steve knows just as I do, every politician who comes into our offices asking for an endorsement says the same thing. I'm going to go down there and I'm not going to be about the party. I am going to be about my constituents and my people. And they get down there and they realize if they don't make it all about the party, they end up with a office next to the boiler, and they're on the postage stamp committee or something. Power, their personal power when they get to Washington, their personal influence rests with towing the party line. And it wasn't always like that. I remember a time, and all of you, most of you are similar age, when there were liberal Republicans, somebody mentioned, or moderate Republicans, somebody mentioned there, I think Milt, you mentioned that you worked for the Nelson Rockefeller campaign. How far are we away from the era when somebody like Nelson Rockefeller could be a Republican? You had conservatives in the Democratic Party, and that was healthy. Every crucial issue didn't pass on a straight party line vote. You had to work and compromise and build consensus to get meaningful legislation passed. And we're such a far away from that, but I think there are steps we could take. I would like to explore this idea of ranked choice voting that Maine has gone to and New York City has gone to. I think there's some promise in there for, to be able to get independents elected, third parties elected. So you have people in Congress and in state houses that don't owe their entire allegiance to a political party, forces them to focus again on their constituents and their communities.
So we're nearing the end of our session, and I wonder if you guys would like to wrap up some practical takeaway information that all of us can use going forward to try to regain some civility, and where we go from here. Any thoughts and tips about what to do next?
You know, check yourselves, your own selves, and make sure you're not that you're not hating when you don't need to hate. You're not making assumptions about people that may be dead wrong. You know, we're in a hurting time in this country, and I mean, I've talked to people who are, you know, are just, you know, people I would normally not consider political, who are just overwrought and traumatized by what's going on. Understand that people are hurting, and you know, do as much as you can to listen and understand and try to figure out why. I mean, we all know why we're hurting, but try to understand why the other person might be hurting and might feel the way they do about things. This is a time, I think, to take it down a notch and try to listen and understand.
Yeah, I mean that taking a beat, taking a breath, you know, thinking about what to say and thinking about who you're saying it to and what they're experiencing is really critical. It's also really hard because I don't remember who it was who said that it's hard just not to be mad. It's hard just not to be angry about the things that are going on, and I feel the same way. I mean, we've sat and watched for 2 months now, while a large group of people, both elected and unelected, have tried to disenfranchise hundreds of millions of Black voters in this country, including in the city of Detroit. I don't know that I've been angrier about politics in any other era that I've been around. But I keep saying that the question people have to ask themselves when they come up with, well, here's what we should do, or here's how we should respond. You know, I always say, think then what, right? What's next? You know, if we're gonna eliminate people from the conversation, if we're gonna push some people aside, then what? How are we gonna? I mean, they still part of the country. They still have to be part of the process. What's the end game? If you could try to think of that before you say something to somebody, before you talk about, you know, what should be done, I think it puts us in a better space. Neither side is going to be able to rule the country all on its own without the other side's participation and consent. It just doesn't work that way. As much as I might like it to be, right? I might love if people I agreed with were in charge and could do whatever they wanted. It's just the nation is not set up that way. It is a pluralistic nation. It needs to be more pluralistic, and there needs to be better representation of voices that have been left out for a long time. But that does not mean that we can just have our way. with everything. We've got to figure out a way to govern together and then to live together under that governance.
How about this too? Stay off social media maybe for a while.
Right? Put it down.
Try to avoid isolating yourself into groups that affirm your viewpoints and don't provide you with any other perspective. And don't quit on this. I mean, it's hard. Committing to civility is hard, and you don't always get it right. You're going to fail. Steve and I don't always get it right, even with each other. Poor Lynn had to sit through one of our rackets yesterday while she was trying to do business. You're going to fail at it. But the thing Steve always says and always sort of tries to make the point is we don't give up. We never say, well, heck, I'm done with him. And sometimes you feel like you are, but we never say that. We always come back for the next round. And it's too bad we have a drink.
That's right.
Bourbon heals a lot. It really
we have a drink, and we sort of check ourselves.
Well, this has been wonderful. It definitely went in a new direction, but this civility sessions always evolve based on what's happening in the world, and so much is happening in the world. Krista wants to know how she can get invited to your bourbon events, which I don't think are happening now, but I should hope that they resume sometime soon.
Hopefully soon. That's the first thing we do when everybody gets vaccinated is bourbons on Steve and I.
That's right.
So after this, we do send out a monthly email that just sort of gives you opportunities to attend other sessions. We are booking for the second quarter of this year. We're booked through March right now. But if your workplace, your organization, your community could benefit from a civility session, let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. And then we will send you guys our newsletter. It shares articles, tips for continuing the conversation and continuing to build civility in our daily lives. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you to Rotary District 6400 for hosting, and to the Delta Dental of Michigan family for supporting this and making it possible. So thank you, everybody. Go in peace.
Thank you. Lots to think about.